Hey, everybody, welcome to Contra Talk. My name is Richard Henry, and this is the podcast where we talk about things that matter. We're going to be talking with the man from Conversations That Matter, Jon Harris. We're going to be talking about many of the projects he's got going on. I hope you enjoy this conversation. Hey, brother. How you doing?
Hey, Pastor Richard. Good to hear from you, see you, and talk with you.
Absolutely. Welcome to the show again. Returning guest. So I wanted to talk about a number of things just for the audience. I know you're doing a ton of content on your own channel and a lot of cross-pollinating, a lot of writing, and you've got several other bigger projects. Writing a book is already a big project, which you've done several times before, but you've got even some bigger things that we're going to be talking about today. And I know sometimes we were talking off camera that it's easy to kind of keep plugging away and, do good work, show up on time, serve the Lord. But at the same time, that's not always how the world works. Sometimes you got to be in that sphere of promoting yourself, self-promotion, whether you're in sales or whether you're in show business. But you and trying to follow Christ, and it's hard to do that yourself. Hey, look at me. I'm going to be doing this. I'm doing this. And so I wanted to give the opportunity to kind of be that go-between, if you will, and talk about some of the projects that you got going on. I know about some of them in more detail than others, but we're going to be talking about that, looking at those, a movie you're doing, documentary, and also where you're going to be speaking next and writing projects and that sort of thing. So why don't you just kind of, I know the audience probably knows you, but why don't you just kind of fill in anybody who doesn't, who you are and what you've been doing and what keeps you busy, Jon?
Sure. Yeah. So where do I start? Most people know me probably online, at least because of my podcast, Conversations That Matter, as you said. And that started to get popular it was January of 2019. And I made a viral video about my experience at Southeastern Baptist Theological Seminary and the social justice movement. And this was pre-2020. So a lot of people thought that was what I was saying was far-fetched. But there were many in the Southern Baptist Convention who knew that, like, I was actually shocked myself to hear some of their stories. They knew what I was saying was exactly true. And they were in other institutions in the SBC, and they reached out, and I realized this was much bigger than I had thought. And then, of course, in 2020, we all realized this was much bigger than any of us had thought. So most of my content over the years has been focused on social justice and refuting it, really explaining it probably more, but then refuting it and helping Christians navigate it. And so I still do some of that. I mean, we're in a phase now where I think it's become more institutionalized, not where we don't see people in the streets right this second throwing rocks or anything, but we have policies going into place in woke corporations and in government entities. And so a lot of the stuff that was fought for in 2020 is now just being ingrained. So it's not a news item as much because it's now it's the new norm. Like, people are kind of woke, like everyone is. So it's kind of hard to you can't, like, what I've realized, and I realized this recently, is in a podcast, oftentimes the videos that get the most views or the podcast clicks, whatever, are those that follow the shiny object. And so
I know
I haven't been, and I haven't wanted to do that. Like, I never started my platform with a shiny object. It wasn't the shiny object when I started. It just became that, and it just kind of exploded. But I do have other interests, and so I have gotten involved with. Lately, some of my content has been on this whole Christian nationalism debate. I guess that's the shiny object right now, but it's something that somewhat interests me. So I've talked about that, and I don't know. It's my podcast, so I get to talk about what I want. So the content varies, but as you said, I am doing a lot of projects right now. I've done a few documentaries before. I'm doing some more now. I'm doing one on the Chinese Communist Party and one on American history called the 1607 Project. And it will accompany a curriculum and a book. We're hoping a curriculum, depending on how much money we can get. And so that stuff's in the works. There's a secret project I really can't give a lot of information about related to social justice that's also in the works. yeah, trying to write a book. That's hard with everything else, but I'm trying to write a book on a positive vision for Christians, politically and socially,
Yeah.
because we're in the building stage now. I think a lot of people realized, okay, the woke stuff is bad. Now what? Now what do we do?
Right.
So I'm working on that. Trying to think what else. I'm probably leaving stuff out here. There's some conferences and things that I'm involved in planning. So yeah, that's a lot. But yeah, it's all good. There's a lot of fruit that comes from this. And so that's a little bit about me. I'm also just a local church member. I'm a minister of music at my church. I'm a pastoral intern. I did go to seminary. I did go to grad school. I don't like to talk about that stuff as much, but
Yeah.
I was on the course to be a pastor and maybe a part-time professor. And of course that's changed since I've had the podcast, but still moving in that direction, well, at least the pastoral direction, just more slowly.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
No, that's good. Well, I appreciate you sharing. Like I said, I'm sure much of my audience knows you. You can see in the back, what is it? The backside of YouTube, all the, your audience likes these types, and,
right. The cross pollination,
all
stuff,
the analytics and all that.
Right.
Let's talk about, I want to talk about the documentary first, because that's an interest of mine. I share occasionally, but I'm originally from California, and pursued film for a while, acting, and then it was like, these are just kind of objects that get moved around. Nobody really cares about an actor. You don't really have any creative power. And so I wrote some scripts and worked with some guys, and we did some shorts. And this is real early, even really before YouTube, or right around YouTube came out in 2005. Anyway, I saw an interest I'd still love to do. I see good movies that are, they're good movies done by pagans, and then you have Christians oftentimes, although it's getting better, but Christians who love the Lord and supposedly want to do excellent things make junky, crappy movies. It's just like, how did, what, why are you? So money's probably involved, but the interests of documentaries and movies and things like that is something of mine. Why, I guess, are you doing something on the Chinese Communist Party? And then what's the other documentary? We'll talk about that. Just kind of flesh those two out. What's the goals on those? And what stages are you in?
Well, that particular documentary started in an interesting place. I never actually thought about doing that before I was asked to do it by a major Christian university. And so they actually paid, and this was, I'm realizing now this was a big mistake on my part to probably take this because of how it turned out and how much time and resources it used up. But they had us make it, and then they didn't want to show it and anywhere. And so it was extremely frustrating, especially for my editor, because unlike, it's not a business for us. This is our heart and soul are in these things. We believe in the cause. We believe in what we're doing. And so that's a very long story short. There's a lot of intricacies to that, but this was in like I want to say maybe 2021, early 2021. And so since that time, we've just keep talking about how we need to take what we did and all the content, because some of the content we own, some of it we don't, or some of it we can use, some of it we don't own. And then taking that content we do have and then re-recording interviews and things like that. So we're in the steering wheel, and we can put it out there. And so that's what that's been. It's been in the making now for a while. It's just, we haven't, until the balloon thing, we didn't really go public with trying to crowdfund for it or anything. So now we are public.
Balloon?
We are trying
I'm
to.
sorry. What's the balloon thing you're talking about?
The Chinese balloon.
Gotcha.
Spy
Okay.
balloon. Yeah.
That
was when that was a wake up call. And we thought we really need to get this project done. And a lot of my work is very supplemental. I feel like there's gaps. There's things that political conservatives or Christians they're not seeing, or they're neglecting, or it's too hot to handle. It's too controversial. We can't talk about that, which is the exact problem with this documentary on the Chinese Communist Party. It's too hot to handle. That's why it wasn't shown. It's too controversial. We can't talk about well, I even need to be careful now. We're on YouTube probably, but we can't talk about antics in an election. We can't talk about COVID stuff and how it relates to the Chinese Communist Party, and that's really the gist of it. So I thought, well, the story has to be told, After I saw what we had produced the first time, I thought to myself, this is the most powerful message. And this was right before the election, right? I thought this is the most, or right after. I'm trying to think. No, it was right before. It was right before, I think, when we had a rough cut. And I thought, if all the Democrats could just see this, Trump would be elected. Like, even if they were on the left on most issues, if they could see what the Chinese Communist Party is doing and how Trump is the sole figure that seems to want to stand up to them, it's a no-brainer. And so I saw the advantage to it just from a political standpoint. And so that's part of, why I want to put it out there. But yeah, it's very supplemental. This is definitely one of the more political projects. Some of what I do is more spiritual or Christian focused. This one's not one of those things.
Yeah.
But I just think it's a story that needs to be told. So we're taking our time. We're trying to do a good job. And yeah.
No, praise God. And you said there's a second one, right? Another one you're working on
right now. Yeah. The 1607 project.
Right.
And yeah. So that's that's on a shoestring budget. So when you talk about Christian films that don't have good quality, I'm not a cinematographer. I'm not an editor. I can do an interview, but I am putting myself in a bit of an uncomfortable position. I'm filming these interviews myself for the most part. And then an editor is going to take them. We're actually almost done with the filming process. And we're going to put a lot of B-roll in there. It's going to be, if anyone listening has ever seen the Muscle Shoals documentary, that's what we're trying to reach for, which is, it's on music, but there's a lot of like, I don't know. You probably would know more than me what style that is, but it's slow.
I'm not familiar with it. So I'm not sure. Yeah, I can't say.
Yeah, it's a lot of like, music in the background as you're kind of doing wide pans over scenery and like,
I forget.
You're trying to get like the sense of the feel of a particular area. And our area is Virginia. So we're going to have a lot of that. And it's really singing the praises of Virginia, how important Virginia was to the founding of the country. How some of our best explorers, military leaders, presidents, Supreme Court justices, our most influential theologians, a lot of them come from Virginia. And so that's the reason that we want to tell the story, because it hasn't really been told. Again, supplemental stuff here. It's before the Civil War that was we didn't have this sort of New England centric view of American history. But since then, over time, this is a gradual process. More and more and more, it's become the founding of the country is basically the Puritans. Virginia's pretty much ignored unless you saw the Disney movie with John Smith and Pocahontas, right? That's about all you know.
Yeah, right.
And that actually serves a purpose. And I realized this a few years ago, that the purpose that serves for the left, at least, is if they can start in New England, they have a justification for this concept of a propositional nation, that the nation is really founded on ideas, and it's to be a great society of sorts, that the city on a hill, the thing that it's this really, and America itself is a nation. And so if you follow that vein, you end up running roughshod over localism, over states, over the nature of a federal republic. And that serves a purpose. It doesn't mean that the Puritans and the Pilgrims, well, the Pilgrims kind of got absorbed by the Puritans, but the Puritans certainly contributed to the America that we have today. But they're one stream. The earliest stream is 1607. That's the most influential stream. That's where the music that we have, and even the cuisine that we have comes from, primarily. So when you think of American food, when you think of American music, when you think of American statesmanship, American political philosophy that's unique to America, that's all coming from Virginia. And so we thought that was a story worth telling, and not to forget about all that.
Yeah.
And we think that there's also an angle here. So this is my Christian side coming out, but I thought, well, this will be for political conservatives, right? They don't want their kids going to the 1619 project, but what we can do, and we're going to interview some people. Like I have a guy who reenacted at Williamsburg as an African-American pastor, the first Baptist pastor, black pastor in the United States. He's going to share the gospel. We've already talked about it. I said, we're getting the gospel into this. And if this gets into some homes of political conservatives who don't know Jesus, they're going to get a full dose of it.
Yeah.
because that's important to the founding of our country. So that's my Christian side. But yeah, I'm looking forward to it. So
Yeah, no, that sounds really exciting. I mean, it's definitely something, like you said, it's New England. We often think New England centric, and I mean, I say, and I care about history probably more than the average person, although I'm not an expert by any means, but I don't really consider Virginia very much. But of course, yeah, like you said, Supreme Court justices, presidents, explorers, military leaders. Virginia was massive. I mean, it was one of, or is the most, and you probably have even better opinion than me, but or more information, that it's so critical and was so critical to the establishment of the republic, the colonies, then of course the United States afterward. But yeah, it does get ignored.
Well, I
That's
mean, if you think about it, even just presidents, you have George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, James Madison, James Monroe, William Henry Harrison, John Tyler, Zachary Taylor. I mean, all of these guys, Virginian.
Wow.
You know, that's huge. That's the early, that's the significant, like if you think of a child, right, when the child's born, what are the most formative years for that child? It's the early years.
Yeah.
Now, it doesn't mean you can't become a Christian later in life or something, but like a lot of your habits are set by the time you're like 8 years old. And it's like 8 years old. That's what I'm just starting to figure out what the world's like. But you've already imbibed so much from your parents, expressions, the way you talk, all this stuff. If you think of the United States and the early years, and even after our Revolutionary War, when we were functioning as a federal republic, those early years were dominated by Virginia. The first Supreme Court Justice, John Marshall, Virginian. The explorers, Lewis and Clark, Virginian. We would not have this country if it wasn't for George Washington, a Virginian, leading the Continental Army. We would not have this republic if it wasn't for the defeat of the British at Yorktown in Virginia. So the Boston Tea Party and stuff, that gets a lot of attention. But I did a tour a few years ago when I was at Liberty of the Southern Theater of the Revolutionary War. And growing up, I'm from California originally, as you are, but a lot of my childhood was spent in upstate New York, where I live now. And you know, I never heard about Virginia. Like I thought the Revolutionary War, that was just Boston and Lexington and Concord and maybe New York. And there's a lot of rich Revolutionary War history here. But when I did the Southern Theater tour, I was just like, wow. You know, this is incredible. All of the battles and basically there would never have been a defeat of the British if it wasn't for Southern participation, particularly Virginians. So there's just so much. I mean, the Declaration of Independence itself, authored by Thomas Jefferson, a Virginian. You know, the statute on religious liberty that Thomas Jefferson authored, on religious tolerance, that's become such a template for freedom of conscience in this country. But that's Virginian. That wasn't something the Puritans would have ever come up with. They were kicking out people like Anne Hutchinson and Roger Williams. So, and that's actually coming up now with the Christian nationalism debate in part. Those kinds of questions like, well, you know, what if you Presbyterians get into power? Are you going to kill all us Baptists and stuff? Well, these discussions happened. They already did. Yeah. And it was really Virginia primarily, and the template they set being an Anglican colony originally that actually had, there's instances of persecution against Baptists, but very early on, though, they developed first this idea of religious toleration, freedom of conscience, and really a general Christendom. They were definitely Christian. Thomas Jefferson authored also the Sabbatarian laws for Virginia. So he wanted people to respect Sunday worship, but he thought that they couldn't be forced, like in New England, to pay taxes to a church that disagreed, that was not where they attended, where they believed the truth was. Yeah. So anyways, there's a lot more that could be said, but Virginia is such an important part of our country's history. Yeah.
Oh, that's good. Truth script. That's the other thing. Together for, I always say it, the Gospel Coalition.
Together for the Gospel. Yeah.
Together. I always say T4G and the TGC. TGC, right, has been, you know, it used to be fine, right, way back when. It's not fine now, by and large. You might still find a diamond in the rough here and there, but it's still marching through, right? And I think this is where some people will, you know, stand for this or that, you know, more leaning, say, fighting for the SBC, for example. You know, the SBC is not going to go away if all the conservatives leave. You know, that's kind of my justification, and some others that know more than me.
Right.
But it's not going to just disappear. I mean, the PC USA didn't disappear, and it's been liberal for 100 years. And so it's like the Gospel Coalition, I mean, they could fire all the conservatives, even though they pretend to be conservative, and it's not going to go away. Right now, we see Vice News and these other woke corporations and news agencies. They eventually fold because you can only tell lies for so long, but damage will be done. So to counter that, to build and not just complain, which I think a lot of people do, and I think we're kind of realizing that that only works kind of in the first stage of something. It's like, that's a problem. And you can't just stay there with anything, whether it's in your local church, your business, anything else. I could have a million examples. So TruthScript, you're working with some others. Why don't you talk about that and what the plan is, launching, and all the rest?
Yeah. So this came about, again, something that I've been talking about for years with various individuals. And we just said we need an alternative to the Gospel Coalition. And the Gospel Coalition does something. It serves a function that we don't have met anywhere. I don't care where you look. G3 is not doing it. Grace to You is not doing it. Ligonier's not doing it. I'm trying to think of the other, Desiring God, whatever. Like, I don't even think really Moscow is doing it. Yeah. There's something that the Gospel Coalition, there's a recipe that they use that works with your average housewife outside of Dallas, that just those other ministries aren't going to communicate to as much. Now, I think what Doug Wilson's done actually comes the closest, but if you read a Doug Wilson blog and you see the guys, I guess I'm really getting into the weeds here, but I don't care.
No, that's okay.
you can cancel me. I don't care, but
I won't.
And this isn't a criticism really necessarily either. Some people might take it that way, but the people around Doug Wilson and his orbit, they write. I don't know if you've noticed this, but if you watch like a video from Toby Sumpter or from Jared Longshore, who does it sound like they're trying to sound like? Doug Wilson. Yeah. Like they write like they're trying to put in all the little jabs, all the right. Their writing style even is influenced by Doug Wilson, which you'd expect if you're around him, right, and you're listening to him a lot. The thing about like that though is even that does not communicate with a lot of. I just think there's a lot of simple kind of working class people without a lot of time that want the short article that gets to the point. They don't have time for all the barbs and the and the jabs and the
references and everything.
Yeah, all the references they have to get a dictionary for, and like it's just there's a certain audience that resonates with, but there's a bigger audience that I just don't think it does.
Okay.
And again, that's not a criticism. It's just
it's their flavor, it's their style, and
it's the style.
It's not like throw it out, but at the same time, it's
bingo.
Not
yeah. I'm not saying don't do that. Like there's some people that will actually they'll laugh when they're reading it, and they have enough of a background to understand what's being talked about, and they have the time to read it. But from a lot of people, I think, it's the reason I think even like Fox News does so well, and a lot of the conservative alternatives that have tried to compete don't. You have to cast a wide net, and it's got to be understandable. And Fox does that. They give you the headline. They give you now. Sometimes I don't like their commentary, but like they are targeting middle class people that don't have a lot of time on their hands, and it's kind of a lower education standard that has to be met in order to understand what they're saying.
Yeah.
So I said. This was maybe a year and a half ago in a group call. We had a bunch of us had a call about this. There's some folks at like American Reformer and some other outlets. And I just said, what can we do to pull resources? Because we have exegetical stuff. You can go to Grace to You and find that, right? We have discernment blog type stuff, but we don't have blogs and resources on very current or applicable topics that are simple and accessible and are inspiring. And so there's even a ratio that I said we should try to meet, which is let's have 4 inspiring positive articles for every 1 negative to keep it from being that kind of discernment style blog. We don't want to do that.
I like that.
So, so it's going to be short. We have a very, short, you've seen it. I don't remember how many words, like, 1,200 words, whatever we're going for. I think
that's what it was.
Yeah. I don't remember what it is, but it's short, a short format that we're giving to people, and communicate this idea in this length of time, send it to us, we'll do whatever editing we need to do, and we'll put it out there. And so that's the first part, is just the blog, and that should be launching this week. the next part of it is trying to form a coalition around this. So we have a statement of faith. It's very it's very generic, I would say, and we're in a draft stage on that, but it's general. Like a lot of people, you're Presbyterian, you could agree with it. Baptist, you could agree with it. It's against social justice. We're explicit about that. But yeah, it provides for a wide tent, which is another one of the things Gospel Coalition did that was so masterful. I think the left in general knows how to work together. And our side, I don't know what it is, man. We just compete for King of the Hill, who's got the best brand and all that, who's going to be the real opposition to the left. It's so ridiculous.
Yeah.
So I was thinking, like, maybe we can get people from these organizations and get a big tent where they can all cooperate for a common objective here. And then conferences maybe could form from that. But I don't want to get too far ahead of myself. I mean, I would love to have a lot of things connected to this, but it's going to be as big or as little as God wants it to be. So it's just starting out with a blog, and then we have one event coming up in Wisconsin on June 10th. Nice. And I'll probably run some of the things I'm doing through TruthScript to initiate that. Like we have a men's conference in the fall. My church is going to be putting it on in part, but I'm going to partner with TruthScript to do that. It is a 501c3, so people, if they donate to it, are going to be able to write that off. That's a big thing, apparently. I'm not a 501c3, so when people donate to me, it's not a charitable deduction.
Yeah.
But TruthScript will be. So that's an advantage. We have a board. We have Russell Fuller, Josh Abatoy from American Reformer, and a pastor, Danny Steinmeier, who's a TMS grad. They're the guys that are on the board.
Okay.
And and that might expand as we go forward, but we're starting off small, and so yeah, hopefully, I don't know if you have any questions about like different aspects of it, but I think it's going to be beneficial.
No, that's good. And again, I think it's encouraging to me, because I think we often believe the lies of the enemy, our own flesh, the world, you're all by yourself. No one thinks like this. No one believes like that. No one values these things anymore, whatever. And that's just not true. And that's something that one of the aspects I'm even thankful for in doing this on YouTube, having conversations like this, and also just meeting people in the comments. And there's a bunch of other content creators like me and you that just do stuff, and they're in any town, USA, over here and over there, and just doing this, and that's pushing against this thing, and that's their niche. And it's good to see this kind of consolidation, because you're right with the kind of King of the Hill stuff, where the left, I think the left works better together because they're more totalitarian, honestly.
Yeah.
And there's really no dissent, and they know that. And I think even on the right, quote unquote, in certain Christian circles, seminary circles, going to Southern Seminary, I can see that to a degree. You kind of have to have yes men or women. And if you dissent too much, it's like, well, get them out, get somebody else in here who's going to agree with me. That's whereas I think the right, or conservative, or whatever you want to call it, whether it's politically or theologically, we value, that's interesting. I totally disagree, but that's interesting, and we value the dissent to say, I don't see it. I don't see that in the scripture. I don't see that in the Constitution. I don't see that in common sense, but I understand what you're saying, and I'm not going to try and kill you or try and cancel you. So that's my theory as far as between left and right, at least now. Of course, 50 years ago, the left used to be all about free speech and against
the left
the man.
Rewards their activists. There's no doubt.
Exactly.
Like the guys who are even behaving the worst get, like, I remember when the BLM stuff happened, there were celebrities in Hollywood raising money for bail. And you're like, what?
It's so insane.
Yeah, it's so crazy. But we would never do that on the right. We would just cast them to the outer darkness.
Right.
And that's, I think, a huge difference. There's no reward mechanism on the right for being down for the cause, for sacrificing for the cause. I've noticed that myself with some of the stands I've taken and others, where like we will go out sometimes and defend to the bone. We'll defend some of the people that we thought were on our side, or they are on our side in some ways. But we can't really expect that the same thing's going to be reciprocated.
Yeah.
Whereas in the left, they will be rewarded for it. And, you know, that creates a level of respect, and there's a hierarchy, a natural hierarchy that forms in that. And I don't know why exactly that is. But, you know, it could be also we have limited resources and people don't contribute as much. I mean, let's face it, if you're on the right, you probably have a family to feed and you have a lot of expenses. You're not giving your money to politics. On the left, you have like a cat, right? So, so you have a lot of,
or you are a cat these days.
Or you are a cat. Cats are definitely on the left. Dogs are definitely more conservative. I don't know if people have realized that, but
they do help you more. We do have a few cats. We don't have a dog yet, but
I have a cat too. I love my cat, but she's a commie. So
it's true. And they're very selfish. And it's like, hey, pet me, pay attention to me. And then it's like, I'm going to scratch you.
Yeah. There's no loyalty. Like there's no patriotism with cats, you know. Dogs, you know, they are very loyal, and I think, you know, if dogs, this is really going in a really weird direction right now, but
I was just thinking that.
What are we doing?
This will be clipped out. It'll be the pet section of
what is I better stop before it gets too weird.
No, it's good. What about birds? No. All right. So we've got a couple documentaries. You've got Truth Script. Lastly, where are you speaking? You say you're working on another writing project. Can't talk about that too much. Is that right? Is that what you said?
The project, the writing project, I can a little bit. Like I'm working on a book just to form a positive response. So like building a vision, a Christian vision for political engagement and that kind of thing. And my basic premise, it actually is super basic when you hear it, but the outworking of it, I think, will be somewhat unique. So the basic premise, though, is that we've gotten away from the natural order that God has established. And it's only with a return to that we have any hope of surviving as a civilization. So hopefully I'll be able to navigate it in such a way that both the theonomist guys and the natural law guys can be united, right? Because we need both of them. The people who like Thomas Aquinas, the people who like Augustine, the people who like, you know, all of that all the infighting that happens between all those guys. Like I'd love to craft a vision that they can both say, like, I'll sign my name to that. I agree. So yeah, that's kind of the thought I have. And I've had that for a while. I think the unique probably spin I'm going to have on it is that I am somewhat influenced by paleoconservative thought. And that would mean people who aren't in evangelical circles. So there's going to be a lot of, like, I think Stephen actually does this to an extent too. He's also influenced by some paleoconservative thought, which is why partially I think he's being attacked as much as he is.
The Stephen Wolf you're talking about? Yeah,
Stephen Wolf, just because there's he's coming with assumptions that there's already been these debates. There's already been clarifications of key things and development, but none of that development took place within evangelicalism. So evangelicals, I've noticed, tend to be very insular. We read our own stuff. We have our own presses, our own movies, our own everything.
Yeah, that's true.
So stuff outside of that it's usually either dismissed or just not, it's not read. It's just not, unless maybe it's on Fox News. And so, and Fox News is like thoroughly neoconservative, if conservative at all. So, I mean, there's definitely conservatives there, but, you know, Tucker just got fired. So it's like, you know, they're great. The guy who was most paleoconservative there, old right kind of guy, is not even there anymore.
Yeah.
So evangelicals, I think, don't think outside the box as much because they're in this box. And that's, again, that sounds like a criticism. It's just the way it is. I'm just making observations.
Yeah.
So my book, I think, hopefully will enrich and introduce evangelicals to some political thought and theory and ideas that maybe they haven't considered that could work for them. And there's some very practical things that can be done that we're not even talking about, especially when it comes to the nature of a federal republic. Like why can't we, right a few weeks ago there in Missouri, the ATF wanted to confiscate, or they wanted to get the records for all the concealed carry permits in a particular town. And so the mayor and the chief of police got up and did a press conference and basically said, if an ATF officer comes into our town, we're going to arrest them. Like that's way outside the box for today. I mean, that wouldn't have been in the early republic. That would like, but today that's crazy talk. Why? How could you ever do something like that? That's the exact kind of thing evangelicals need to be considering on issues like religious freedom and drag queen story hour and preferred pronouns, like doctrine of the lesser magistrate, localism, states sovereignty, nullification, interposition, maybe even secession. I mean, like all these things are being looked at again by political conservatives. We have national divorce language coming up, but evangelicals are still kind of stuck in like 1985 thinking, well, if Ronald Reagan comes back, we can have America again. And it's like, you don't understand. That's gone. Like
Donald Trump's Ronald Reagan.
Yeah. No, well, not, yeah.
He's got flavors, but he's also a lot like Nixon and also like Hugh Hefner.
Andrew Jackson. He's a lot like Andrew Jackson too.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he's gay. He's pro-gay. Just don't forget that.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
So anyway,
no, that's a good point with evangelicals in the sense that we do think there's still kind of this middle road. And you know, I think some people, they get stuck, especially where I'm at, more rural or small town, whatever you want to call it, but we do have these little rectangle boxes we carry around in our pockets, right? Like that instantly gives us Facebook and Instagram and Twitter and the
right.
Whatever
We're connected
news
to the national or international discourse.
Well, I mean, I'll tell you, I saw two different cross-dressing people just yesterday. One was in Louisville, so okay, but one was here walking by. I mean, it was clearly a dude wearing a wig and a dress, like just walking on the street.
Whoa, you're out in the country too. Wow.
And this is a town of 8,000. I mean, it wasn't literally in the middle of nowhere, but I'm like, but that wouldn't happen even 10 years ago.
Right.
Let alone 1985 or 1955. And so it's like, we have this weird distinction, and I try and bring this to the pulpit. Sometimes people question, like, well, why do you talk about that so much? It's like, well, because you guys are being influenced by it, whether it's through your cable news or online, or just advertisements. I mean, you can notice if you watch any commercials for any length of time, there is a trend here, and in these different directions that you wouldn't have even seen 5 years ago.
Yeah.
And it's so subtle, and yet people kind of just swallow it up and think, well, yeah, that's just what it is.
Yeah, and like, it changes even us. Like we are impacted by seeing those things to the point that, like, all right, I'll give you a good example. Like if there's a movie that features like a momentary gay scene, a kiss or a suggestion that these people are gay. Remember only like 5 years ago, parents like were losing their minds over that, wouldn't take their kid to see the movie. Like that was a big deal. Now you don't even hear about it. And it's in every movie, just about like every kid's movie almost, except Mario. My wife and I saw that, but except most kids movies have that scene. It's the obligatory scene now. You have to have like some suggestion that there's something gay. The Lightyear movie had that, right? Yeah. It's just not even controversial now. Like, so the standards change to where it's like, well, do they do anything beyond like a suggestion? Like, is it physical? And like the fact that we're even asking that question is crazy. So I've bring up the suggestions or the examples sometimes. I don't know if you went to the theater to see Lord of the Rings, the first one in like 2001, whenever that came out.
I saw The Two Towers and Return of the King. I didn't see Fellowship of the Ring in the theater for some reason, but the other two.
So Fellowship of the Ring has this scene though at the end where like one of the Arakai gets his head cut off, right, by Boromir, or maybe no, it was Aragorn. And I remember sitting there in the theater, and I don't know, I was like 12 or 13, I think, but I was young, PG-13 movie. Yeah. And I'm sitting there, and the whole audience gasps. They can't believe what they just saw, right? Yeah. So, and then the Hobbit movies come out. This is 10 years later, and I'm sitting in the theater, and there's a more violent scene where, again, same thing. Someone cuts off the head of like an orc and Arakai. And you know what the audience did? They laughed.
Wow.
They laughed. And I'm thinking like, I wasn't in the same theater, but I'm in the same area. It's the only difference is 10 years.
Wow.
We went from gasping at that to laughing at it. Like,
wow.
And so good on you for talking about that stuff, because so many pastors don't. They just will not. So,
yeah. Well, I try not to rabbit trail too much when I'm preaching, or when I'm doing shows like.
But it's fine on podcasts. Yeah, we can.
Yeah, no, that's right. Yeah, that's true. All right, so we've got you've got the documentaries, you've got Truth Script, you've got the book. Where are you going to be speaking next? What's your summer looking like?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Where can people find all these? Drop all the websites, and we'll wrap it up.
Yeah. So I need to go to my own website to look at that. So you can go to worldviewconversation.com or johnharrispodcast.com and go to speaking, and that's where a lot of my stuff is. So the next one is June 10th in DeForest, Wisconsin, the Be Not Conformed conference. I'll have more information about that in the next 2 days of where people can go to find out more information. But it's at the DeForest Evangelical Free Church. Starts at 2 p.m. That Saturday, June 10th, and then I'll be preaching June 11th at the that church. So you can come, you can travel, make it kind of a 2-day thing. I'm going to be there. Russell Fuller's going to be there. We've scheduled this before the recent controversy, but Stephen Wolf is going to be there too. So you want to ask him a question in person, you could do that. And then after that, I mean, it's not for a while. September 21st through 24th, we have a men's conference here in New York, and then October 21st, the Jesus and Politics Conference in Syracuse, Indiana. I will say this: people can pray for this. There is a donor, a big, not to me, but just someone who has the money to spend on something like this, and they have yesterday reached out to me and a few others saying that they want. I think because of all the stuff happening with G3, they want a big conference. Another one, nothing against G3, but it's just some people are disappointed with some of the things that have happened lately, and they're just hungering for some kind of an alternative. And he thought, we've been talking about this for years anyway, how we need more conferences, bigger conferences. And so there is a plan underway. We're in the initial stages of doing a big conference. We want to get Vodi Bakum. We want to get Rosaria Butterfield. We want to get, I haven't even talked to them about it yet, but we want to get, some, maybe even people like Steve Deace, political conservatives, right? And hold a larger conference, like the size of like a Shepherd's Conference or a G3 or any of those. So, we'll see what happens, but people can pray for that. And if that happens, it'll probably be in the late summer. So.
Yeah, no, that sounds good. Yeah, that's just pulled up your website there. So I did just find Worldview Conversations, and it took me to some weird website. So it's Worldview Conversation.
That's right. Worldviewconversation.com, or you can just, to make it easier, JonHarrisPodcast.com.
That's what I actually did to find it in. I just searched it just now. Yeah, I'm working on something else.
So JonHarris.com I couldn't have because it's a bodybuilder.
Oh,
and
nice.
so it's
that's not you. I thought that was.
No, I joke with people. Yeah, I've showed it to my wife a few times. I'm like, have you seen my website? And then
she's like,
that's not you.
You're like, no, babe, it is. It
was. Before I was married, I had this 6-pack.
That's right.
So.
And all these bulges everywhere. Yeah. No, that's good, brother. Well, I appreciate it. You want to have any last closing thoughts, comments?
No, but I appreciate you, Richard. It's good to hear from you and see you, and I'm looking forward to you writing for Truth Script as well, getting involved with that.
Yeah.
Man, there's so many things. There's so many possibilities right now. The world is just wide open, I think, for opportunity with what the internet's provided us, and I think the dearth of leadership, even in the evangelical world, is a lot of younger guys are starting to ascend. And I think it's exciting. You're one of those guys. There's just a lot of good things happening. So yeah, keep doing what you're doing. I know you're in a rural area, but those are most of the churches, right? In our country are in rural areas with common people. That's where it's at. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that word, brother. And again, thank you for being on, and everyone check out these websites, worldviewconversation.com. That's John's website. Or what was the other one? You said not the bodybuilder website. You have
JonHarrisPodcast.com. Yeah.
Podcast. There we go.
You can go there. You go to laststandstudios.org too to check out the documentary stuff.
Perfect. Well, I'll put all those links in the description for everybody as well. Well, it's been a pleasure. Take care, everybody. And God bless. Have a great day.